Okay, we just crossed over the border from Switzerland to Germany, and we're headed to KARLSRUHE, to the kever of the Karban Nesanel. But before we speak about the Karban Nesanel, let's speak about the Karban Nesanel's Rebbe, his Rabbi Avram Broida, the Eshel Avram. Many are completely unaware about Rabbi Avram Broida, but Avram Broida is Mamish, the Rebbe of Roiv Chachmei Yisrael in his generation. Rabbi Avram Broida. He lived from 1645 to 1717. He's buried in Frankfurt. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz wrote a Haskama on the Eshel Avram. He writes about Rabbi Avram Broida, Noida bi Yisrael Shemai, Asher Heyer mi Mizrach Tzedek Shemai, B'chol ha'aratzos. His light shone forth from the east. V'hifli lasos, he acted wondrously. Lilmaid, ulalamed, ulaharbetz tov Yisrael, ad asher mamish, roiv, chachmei Yisrael b'dar hazeh, hashleimim himashoisei dvarav. Most of the chachamim were talmidim of Rabbi Avram Broida. Rabbi Avram Broida was a talmid of Rabbi Yitzchak Charif, who is the Reish Mesivta in Prague, and he was the Mamala Makom of Rabbi Naftali HaKoyen Katz in Prague. Many of the Gaonim learned under Rabbi Avram Broida. Rabbi Cheskel Katzanelenbogen writes in his Haskama, Asher Talmidim Ravatz Keloivesh Tashbeitz Milei Haaretz Lo'imek V'Shamayim L'Rum B'Talmidim. Now, Rabbi Avram Broida had a very interesting methodology of teaching. He used the methodology of pilpul. In fact, in the Sefer Maskil El Dol Chelik Daled Klal Yud, he brings that the Marsha one time came to reprimand Rabbi Avram Broida in a dream about the way he was teaching Torah, because he taught in a dialectical way, in Derech Pilpul. Rabbi Avram Broida said, you have to understand that through his Kayach HaPilpul, he was able to restore the luster and the glory of Torah. He had a great love for his Talmidim. Many of the Talmidim had no money, no resources. Rabbi Avram Broida provided for them. It says that his house was open like the house of Avram Avinu. Among his Talmidim, Rabbi Yosef Steinhardt, and the Me'il Tzedakah, Rabbi Shmuel Krakover, Rabbi Yehuda Migolina, Rabbi Pinchas Katzanelenbogen, but also the Karban Nesanel, Rabbi Nesanel Vaya. We're headed to KARLSRUHE, to the kever of the Karban Nesanel, again a talmid of Rabbi Avram Broida. Now, his Chidushim, Avram Broida's Chidushim, were published on Masechta Chulin, Baba Basra, Baba Metzia Gittin, the Sefer Eshel Avram. On Kedushin and Ksubis, Toldois Avram. On Ksubis Shmaitza Charata, we have some of his Chidushim published ala Torah called Penine Kedem. On his Matseva in Frankfurt, it was inscribed, Bekever Zeh, Makar HaChachma Nikvar. In this kever was buried the source of wisdom. Va'olam babi ivarain, the world came to blindness. Ish tzadik tamim haya tahar v'kadosh. Rabban shal kol b'nei hagoyla. As we mentioned, Roiv Chachmei Yisrael were Talmidim of the great Rabbi Avram Broida, Zechusai Yagein Aleinu. It's a great zechia that we made the long trek all the way from Zurich here to Germany, to KARLSRUHE, to the kever of one of the great Achronim, the Rav Nesanel Vayel, the Karban Nesanel. The Karban Nesanel was a descendant of Mahari Vayel, one of the backbones of the Piskei Ashkenaz. Harav Hagoin Hagadol Amafursa Moifes Hadar L'chol Chasidav, Maran of Rabbana, Rav Nesanel Vayel, who's the Av Bezdin here in many communities, and then here in KARLSRUHE. He was nifter on B'yom Aleph of Chodesh Iyar, and then on the back we were given some more information about Rav Nesanel Vayel. Rav Nesanel, Allah Lamoraim, he went up to Shemayim Zokein Usvayomim, V'yoshev v'yeshiva Shemayim Mefarim, Charif, V'shanun B'shasu Poiskim. What's amazing is it says that he's a descendant Migeza Mahariv, that's Mari Vayel, and Maharame Rothenberg, and many Balei Atoisvis. And then the kever is merumaz to many nisim that happened when they came to bury him. Actually, the Karban Nesanel was nifter in Rastatt, at 82 years old. It's 5-hour journey from Rastatt here to KARLSRUHE. and they carried the coffin very, very slowly. And still in 3 hours they made it here. That's what it's marumas on the kever to the nisim that happened. Besides Karban Nesanel, he also wrote Nesiv Chaim on Shulchan Aruch, Shalos Tshuvas Torahs Nesanel, and Minchas Nesanel. He was a Rosh Hashiva in Prague, together with Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Avram Broida. He studied by Rabbi Avram Broida for 18 years. When he was 5 years old, his father, Rav Naftali Hirsch, was killed, and his Rebbe, Rabbi Avram Broida, gave his niece to the Karban Nesanel to marry. So, in essence, Rabbi Avram Broida became, so to speak, like the father-in-law of sorts to the Karban Nesanel. One amazing thing, we're just going to end off because it's starting to rain, that in Shalos Tshuvas Avnei Nezer Chaim Simedalad, he says, Karban Nesanel is very beloved to me because I heard from my father-in-law, the Kutzker, the great accolades of the gadlus of the Sefer Karban Nesanel, which was a pirush on the Rush, that one of the other Talmidim of Rav Avram Broida, Rav Shmuel Krakover, told him, you have to write a pirush on the Rush. I myself would write a pirush, if not for the fact that I'm a Sagi Nahar. So, Zechusa Yagein Aleinu Va'al Kol Yisrael. Amen. Okay, so just to say Dvar Torah from the Karban Nesanel at Eskabri, there's a famous question. On the one hand, the pasuk says, "The raglecha loy batseika," their feet did not swell. Rashi says, "Kederach holchei yachef," like people in the midbar who would usually go barefoot, which indicates that in the midbar they walk barefoot and still raglecha batseika. On the other hand, the pasuk says, "V'nalchem loy balsam me'al raglechem." Their shoes did not wear out. That implies they wore shoes. How do we reconcile this? If you look into Karban Nesanel in the Sechta Moed Katan, Karban Nesanel says on the Gemara says that when they were in the midbar for 40 years, they were menudel hashamayim, they were nidoy, which means while they traveled, they wore shoes, but when they got to the camp, they took it off. So accordingly, we can answer the contradiction in the Psukim that while they traveled, their shoes didn't wear out, but when they took it off in the camp, when they were barefoot, then v'raglecha loy batseka, their feet didn't swell. So according to the Karban Nesanel's understanding, there comes a beautiful explanation to how we understand the contradiction in the Psukim. Zechusa Yagein Aleinu. It's a great zechus to be here in KARLSRUHE. We're at the kever of Rabbi Yaakov Weil, who's the author of Sefer Toras Shabbos, Toras Yom Tov, and it seems he was a descendant of Rabbi Taya Weil. And may all of our tefillos in this makom be niskabel barachim u'mevaratzayim. Okay, we're coming back from KARLSRUHE, where we had the zchus to be at the kever of the Karban Nesanel of Nesanel Weil. But the Karban Nesanel had a very illustrious son, Rav Yedidya Weil, known as Rav Taya Weil. This is an amazing picture of Rav Taya Weil. You see his Hadras Panim, Temunas Harav Agoin Moreno Rav Yedidya Hamachuna Taya Weil Av Bezdin Varam Bekal Kodesh KARLSRUHE V'Hamadina Tayas Weil Oberlandis Rabbiner Marda Asra Zu KARLSRUHE. So we have a record of what it said on his kever, although we were not successful in locating the kever. The original kever said, Yuzlu Dima Yedidya Hagoizer by Naga Taflu Yachad El Ashmua V'Yisoinu V'Kanu Yelule Yalil Lahara Hemid Talmidim Harbe V'Hoyel Tzayna Roya. Actually, he was maimed many Talmidim, but we have a tradition that he had literally hundreds and thousands of Talmidim. In the Pinchas Chevra Kadisha, brought at the end of the Sefer Minchas Nesanel, it mentions that he had hundreds and thousands of Talmidim. And what's interesting is he did not publish his Svarim in his lifetime, but there was one particular Sefer that was published anonymously. It's a Sefer that many are familiar with. It's a Sefer on the Haggadah, and the name of the Haggadah is Haggadah Marbe L'Saper. Actually, in our humble Sefer Maggid Harakiah on Pesach, we bring from Marbe L'Saper in a number of places. Most notably, he is the one who brings down the source for Echad Miyodeya and Chad Gadya. In Haggadah Marbe L'Saper, he says Piyut Zeh, the Piyut of Echad Miyodeya and the Piyut of Chad Gadya. It is said that it was found in the Geniza, in the walls of the Beis Medrash and Garmaiza of the Reikeach. V'loi noida mihu machabra, we don't know who composed it, and it was enacted to say on Leil Shimurim. So the source of where we found Echad Miyodeya and Chad Gadya comes from Rav Taya Weil in Haggadah Marbala Saper. So you'll ask, how do we know he wrote Haggadah Marbala Saper? He didn't put his name on it. So amazingly, in the Tshuvas of Tshuva Me'ahava, in Tshuva Siman Reish Lametes, he brings, actually, it's in Tshuva Reish Lametes, he brings that it is our tradition that Haggadah Marbala Saper was written by Rav Taya Weil, even though if you look in the Haggadah, there's a haskama from Rav Taya Weil. But amazingly, in the Hakdama of Marbala Saper, he says a line that, so to speak, gives away that he's the author. He says, Yedid yeh hamasaper, uvahalel upesach yisaper, yizke lebinyan beis habechira, lekaper. That's Rashi Tevois Yedidya Weil. So the closing line of the Hakdama of Haggadah Shel Pesach, Marbala Saper, is Rashi Tevois Yedidya Weil. That is the name of Rav Taya Weil. So he was a Talmud of Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Actually, some have commented that if you look at that picture of Rav Taya Weil, there is a resemblance to Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Interestingly, the Karban Nesanel and Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz were co-Rosh Yeshivas in Prague. Now, it's been published a number of Svarim of Rav Taya Weil. He was born in 1722, the night of Yom Kippur, and what's amazing is that he wrote a sefer, Levush Habadim, of his drashos on Yom Kippur, and in the Hakdama, he says the reason why he gave these drashos on Yom Kippur is, he says he was born on the night of Yom Kippur when it came out on a Wednesday, right after Chatzos, and it is said, Reb Taya Weil writes in his Hakdama to Sefer Levushei Habadim, that sometimes a person is zoicha to a special neshama kedoisha on the day that they were born. He named it Levushei Habadim. It's gematria divrei Torah. Also, Belel Yom Kippur Noilad is the same numerical value. So we have some amazing yediyos about Rav Taya Weil. He originally did not want to be Nene Meir from his Torah, so he went into some kind of business, but he did not have success in that. And then he told his father that if the Rabbanus comes his way, he would accept it. It's interesting, the Rav Taya Weil became a choyle in his eyes. He was not able to see because of his ion in learning, and he had to travel to Carlsbad in order to regain his vision. In 1769, his father, the Karban Nesanel, passed away, and he was offered to be the Mamala Makam of his father, the Karban Nesanel, but he did not want to accept that position right away. He waited an entire year until he acceded to the request of the city. In the year 1778, Reb Taya Weil, contracted a very severe lung disease, and the tzibur was mispalo for him, and he began to return to his health on Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Rosh Chodesh Iyar was both the yard site of his father, the Karban Nesanel, and of the Rebbe of his father, Rav Avram Broida. Now, we glean a few things about Reb Taya Weil from his various tshuvas. So, for example, in Yoredeya, Siman Kuf Yud Aleph, Reb Taya Weil discussed a situation where one of his Talmidim had lost a relative, and the question is, should the yeshiva tell this bacher about the patira of the parent, or should they instead hide it? Should they instead hide it because it will cause bittul Torah? And Reb Taya Weil paskint, it's found in Shuvas Yoredeya Siman Kuf Yud Aleph, that if the bacher is a ben Torah and he's going to lose out 7 days of learning, efshir de'ein lahagid, and halacha l'maisa, he paskind about a certain bacher who the report came that he lost a relative on the 29th day of the month, that in other words, the report came on day 29 after the p'tir of a parent that he lost a parent. Reb Taya Weil paskin not to tell the Bachar until after the Shloshim in order not to be mevatel him from his learning. By the way, it's well known that when Rav Ruderman lost a parent, the Alter of Slobodka also concealed it from Rav Ruderman in order to save the Bittul Torah. In terms of the various Chiburim that Reb Taya Weil wrote, he wrote Ginzei HaMelech HaMasechta Megillah, which was later published in 1977. He wrote Divrei Shalom Ve'emes on the Rambam, which is published at the end of Ginzei HaMelech. He wrote Birchas Yom Tif on Masechta Beya, which was published in 1978. Again, a few hundred years after his Patira. Adnei Kesef on Masechta Kedushin, which was published in 1979. Chuvas of Rabbi Yehuda Taya, and also the Sefer Levushe Habadim. There are many great Sfarim of the Achronim that Rav Taya Weil appears in. So you could find he is brought in the Noid Yehuda, he's brought in the Hafla, in Shalos HaTshuvas Give Us Pinchas, he's brought in Shalos HaTshuvas Zuchan Yosef. Now, the Tshuva Me'ahava, and the above mentioned Tshuva, disagrees with something Rav Taya Weil brings in Haggadah, Mar Belasaper. There's a very big question. Why did Chazal, why were they misakein on that a woman is mavorech on Yom Tif when she lights the Neros of Yom Tif? We know that a woman lights Neros of Yom Tif, so she makes a Shachianu. And the Tshuva Me'ava and Siman Reish Lamed Tes wonders, what's the reason for that? So he says there's a new Haggadah called Haggadah Mar Belasaper from Reb Taya Weil that he brings, that the Yosef Oimetz already discussed this, and he brings from his father the Karban Nesanel to let the women do this. It makes them feel good that they can make a Shachianu. However, the Tshuva Me'ava disagrees. He says, how can we let them do this? What's going to happen Leil Pesach when they make Kiddush and then they're going to say Shachianu? Again, it's going to be a bracha l'vatala. This, of course, is something that Rabbi Yaakov Emden discusses in his Tshuvas. And this is an instance where Reb Taya Weil is quoted by the great Poskim, the Tshuva Me'ava. So we were in KARLSRUHE, in the Makoy Menucha of Reb Taya Weil. So even though we weren't at the exact location of his kever, but the real kever of tzaddikim, Chazal say, Divareim heim tziyunam, their words, their Torah is their tziyun. So when you can't actually be at the kever, you learn their Torah. The location of the Torah is really the greatest makom menuchasam, and in that merit, all of our tefillos should be niskavel barachamim uvratzim.